Well, on Saturday, which I think it might still be Saturday in Australia, or it might be yesterday. Either way, they're across the world, so it's like a 12-hour difference. Or is it more than that? No, it's a way more than a 12-hour difference. It's almost an entire day's difference. But anyway, on Saturday in Australia, there was, I wouldn't call it an uprising. The Australians aren't really capable of that much. But there was a big protest in Melbourne, which is in the state of Victoria. Melbourne is the most locked down city in the world. It was kind of tied with Buenos Aires for a while, although on Friday, I guess, they eased it slightly. Um, you're allowed to walk around outside without a mask, and the police won't, uh, beat you with batons. So that's progress, I guess. Uh, but still, Melbourne and Victoria in general, not a free place. Australia in general, not a free place. And so there were, people out in the streets demanding that, what's his name? Dan, oh gosh, I almost said Dan Abrams. It's not Dan Abrams. Dan Andrews. They're demanding that Dan Andrews, who is the premier of Victoria, kind of like the governor, although he's more like a prime minister. He's in that he's selected by parliament. He's not popularly elected because he has been a little tyrant all throughout the last year or two. People are fed up with it. Unfortunately, not enough people are fed up with it. Pretty sure that the anti-lockdowners in Australia, while they have gotten a lot more vocal, they are still a vocal minority. And in Victoria right now, they're trying to pass a new law because, you see, they've been doing all of this under emergency powers. And an emergency, kind of by definition, is something that is short. It's something that comes to an end. An emergency is something that comes up that you're not expecting, but it's not something that is just the state of existence forever. And so they're trying to actually pass a law in Victoria to replace the state of emergency so that they can have all of these tyrannical powers and exercise them over people just under normal times. And so this would make the health minister essentially a dictator. We give them dictatorial power. They could dictate rules that would have the force of law without any, without going through the legislature, without there being any debate, just on the advice of the what was the person's title, like chief health officer, I think, who's under the health minister. So essentially, what they're talking about is the health minister has his little Fauci under him, whose job it is to say, "Oh, I'm the objective scientist, and I will tell you what needs to be done." And so essentially, Fauci, or the Fauci equivalent in Victoria, can whisper in the ear of the health minister, and the health minister can just sign an executive order and say, "I hereby decree that all unvaccinated people should be put in concentration camps," for example. And the law specifically says that the pandemic orders can be targeted at specific classes of people based on common circumstances or traits. And so I think that would even mean, like, not that this would apply in Australia, but I mean, I think in theory that would even apply to, like, racial discrimination. If he wanted to, he could say, all the black people, you get into the camps. Although I don't expect that to happen in Australia. But just as an example, I think it's much more likely what they mean by this, what they have intended when they say certain classes of people. They're referring to the unvaccinated, the great unwashed. Unfortunately, I think this will probably pass. There isn't much opposition. You have to remember, these rules in Australia are being put forward by the Tories, by the Conservatives. It's not like here in America where we have a red state, blue state situation where the blue states, generally speaking, are very strict, and the red states, because, they want to be opposite of the blue state, if nothing else, are less strict. You don't have that in Australia. This strictness is coming from, the quote-unquote right, whatever that means in the context of Australia. And so there's really no opposition to it. You've got the left, which would be doing this or worse if they were in power, and then you have the right in power, who are very happy to carry out these tyrannical acts. So we'll just have to wait and see how this new law is implemented and what sorts of terrible deeds the state carries out in the name of this law. And even if the current situation subsides, and someday over the next few years Australia gets back to normal, this law will be resurrected at a later date to justify all sorts of terrible abuses once again. So it's really scary when you see something like this passed. And I don't envy the people who live there. Now, moving on to something that I wanted to get to yesterday and didn't have time, and frankly, would not have gone that well with what I was talking about yesterday. I spent 25 minutes on that topic as it is. If I spent an extra 3 minutes, on this next issue, that just wouldn't fit well together. But today, since the Australia thing, I was able to get through it relatively quickly, I have time to discuss the events in Virginia yesterday, which we actually have a bit more information on now than we did yesterday when I originally planned to talk about it. So for those of you who missed it, it really was a funny situation. In Virginia, there was an attempted false flag perpetrated against the Youngkin campaign. Youngkin is the Republican running there, and they had 5 or 6 people wearing khaki pants, a white polo shirt, sunglasses, baseball hats, which didn't match, holding unlit tiki torches, standing in the rain, and they posed in front of Glenn Youngkin's bus and said, "We're all in for Glenn." And some local journo from local news station decided to just tweet this out unironically, and she got wonderfully ratioed. But there were a lot of Dem operatives who were retweeting this unironically as well, trying to spread this idea that oh, look, there are some people standing in front of Glenn Youngkin's bus holding tiki torches. You know what that means? Wink, wink. And the funny thing is that 99% of Americans would have no idea what that means to a Democratic political operative. The funny thing is that, and again, I won't even say Democrats in general, Dem operatives, Dem politicos, campaign strategists, these sorts of people are so obsessed with Charlottesville from a few years ago, yes, this is what it's a reference to, that they have in their mind politicized tiki torches, and they think if you see a tiki torch, you're supposed to think, oh, that must be a neo-Nazi, and more so, they think that connection in people's minds is so visceral and immediate that if they have a few of their folks wear some sunglasses and hats so you can't really see their face too well, and stand in front of Glenn Youngkin's bus with a tiki torch, you're supposed to make the connection in your mind, oh, tiki torch, Glenn Youngkin bus, Glenn Youngkin is a white supremacist. They really thought this would work. And to me, what is most remarkable about this is not that they tried to smear Glenn Youngkin as a white supremacist and stage some false flag where they had people who were supposed to be dressed like neo-Nazis saying, "We love Glenn." That's not the big shocker here. The shocker is they actually thought that their costumes really screamed white supremacist. They were just people wearing matching shirts, polo shirts, and poorly fitting khaki pants. Actually, you know what? They might not have even been polos. They might have been long sleeve. But either way, again, the tiki torch, that was the only real defining characteristic, and you're supposed to know that means white power or something. Oh, and the funniest part was one of the 6 people standing there was a black guy that they got to do it. So again, how are people who are looking at this supposed to make that connection in their head? I see 4 or 5 white people and 1 black guy standing with tiki torches in front of Glenn Youngkin's bus. Therefore, I must think Glenn Youngkin is a white supremacist. Where does that add up? It's completely bizarre. And when you see a campaign devolving to that degree, that they think that like this is I guess the Lincoln Project, that's what I have to get. It wasn't actually Terry McAuliffe's campaign. Apparently this was the Lincoln Project who was taking credit for setting this up. Now I don't know if this is true. This is a lot like how ISIS used to take credit for terrorist attacks all over the world. We don't really know if ISIS did them. But it made ISIS look better in their minds when they're like, hey, if we take credit for this, it looks like we're really powerful and have a wide reach. The Lincoln Project might be doing the same thing. The Lincoln Project might just want attention. But either way, even whether they're stealing somebody else's street cred or whether they did this themselves, I think it's pretty clear that this was the worst false flag that I've ever seen. These guys were worse than the boomer-fed Ray Epps. It was so much more obvious because they were not white supremacists. They were only what could be described as a Democrat caricature of a white supremacist. And only someone, who's so unhinged could be so out of touch as to not even take the time to study what they're trying to imitate. So when I see a stunt like this, it really makes me think, wow, McAuliffe is done. Because this is not how successful campaigns operate. These are not smart people. Because it's not like I'm saying, oh, well, the tiki torch stunt is going to sink McAuliffe. No, it's evidence that there are absolute buffoons involved in this campaign, and they don't know what they need to do. They have no idea what they're doing. And, I don't feel bad for Terry McAuliffe. I mean, he's not a nice guy, by all accounts. I'm not necessarily thrilled about this Youngkin guy, but I don't live in Virginia, so I don't really care either way. It's just kind of, it's something to watch and pay attention to. But, wow, this stunt really blew me away. So we'll see what happens on Tuesday. Looks at this point like it's going to be a good night for Mr. Youngkin. But, the main topic today was Australia. I wanted to put in my 2 cents about the ridiculous tiki torch gate, or, tiki torch false flag, whatever you want to call it. Terry Smollett. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.